These are 10 essential Rocket League tips that every player should know in just 10 minutes. To get the most out of this video, make sure to watch the whole way through as many of these tips are connected to each other. Starting with tip number 1, know where the other players are at all times. This includes your teammates or opponents, but this is actually one of the most important tips that I'm going to be giving here, and you'll notice that a lot of the other tips are going to refer back to this. To put it simply, all of your decisions in Rocket League come down to the other player's positioning, boost, and speed relative to yours. So it's very important to know where they're at all times. And to do this, you can either use your camera controls like toggling ball cam, using your camera stick or your rear view camera, or you can use your intuition based on where the players were a couple seconds ago, but you got to be very careful with this and you don't want to blindly assume where they are. Tip number 2 is when to boom the ball versus control it, and this is one of the most commonly asked questions in Rocket League, and I've seen a lot of takes on this, but I think this is the best way to think about it. Ideally in Rocket League, you want your team to have possession of the ball for as much of the match as possible. Booming the ball can be good for this if you find gaps in their defense. So maybe nobody's covering their backboard or teammates wide open for a pass. Pretty much as long as you can boom the ball accurately to a spot where your team can still be first to the ball, it can be good. And it can also be good if you find that your opponents are pushed up too far. Maybe their last man is way too far up, or one of the opponents overcommitted and is now behind your entire team. You'll want to speed up the play because that might cause the opponents to panic in their rotation. And so booming the ball could be good for that, but you could also control the ball as long as you're still speeding up the play, because if you go too slow, you're going to give the defense time to set up again, or you could risk getting demoed in the back if an opponent's still behind you. The only time where I would boom the ball away and not really worry about keeping possession is if your team is low on boost, because that can give your team time to get boost. Now, if your opponents are giving you a ton of open space, that's usually a really good opportunity to control the ball. And in one of the later tips, I'm going to tell you some of the best ways to utilize the open space that you get. It's really all situational, but I would say before you make your touch, just ask yourself, what does this touch do for my team? And I think asking yourself that question a lot of times will make sure you make the right touch, or at least think about it going forward. Tip number 3 is that your corner is the safest spot on the map. This is because the angle to shoot on your net is so small that it makes it such an easy save for you. So that's why when it's in your corner, don't panic, don't try to overcommit. We'll talk about what exactly that means a little bit later. The main thing you want to be concerned about is if the opponent can get a midfield pass at that point, because midfield is where it gets dangerous, right? That's where the opponent can shoot almost anywhere on your net and the save is going to be a lot harder to get. So a lot of times when the ball is in your corner, that's a good time to control it because it's in a safe spot. But as I said last time, if you find that the opponents are pushed up a little too far, then that could be a good opportunity to boom it away from your corner. Tip number 4, play proactively, not reactively. So what does this mean? Let's take a situation where the ball is bouncing off of a wall. If you were playing reactively, you would keep driving towards that wall as the ball is about to bounce, and then after it bounces, you would then turn to where the ball is going to, which would be midfield. If you played proactively, you would already be facing midfield before the ball actually bounces, so you're already pre-positioned for the bounce. You basically just want to play a couple steps ahead in position for where the ball is going to go and not where it's currently going. And just by playing proactively, this can put you ahead of the curve in your games, or eventually when you get to higher ranks, it's going to help you keep up in those lobbies because everyone starts to play proactively at that point. Now, tip number 5 is about committing less. So I mentioned committing with some of the previous tips, but the way I think of committing is basically flipping, because when you flip, you're stuck in the flip animation for a little bit of time, so you can't really change direction. So by not flipping, you're actually going to give yourself more flexibility in case things go wrong. If you're playing off the ball and someone's about to hit it so that it changes direction or speeds up, you'll be in a better position to cover multiple options rather than going all in on one option and hoping it works. Now, if you're playing on the ball, the best ways to challenge without committing are drive challenges, fake challenges, single jump 50s, or low 50s. With all of these, there's a much lower recovery time than just flipping into the ball. You can actually get back in the play so much quicker, and it's just overall less risky. And I would highly recommend watching Squishy Muffin's Road to SSL and 1v1 series because he shows how to use these challenges very well. All right, tip number 6, this is a very important one. Understand when situations are threatening, and you'll see almost every rank has a problem with this, but especially in Platinum Diamond, they'll basically just jump at every ball even if there's no real reason to, and that's why you'll see a lot of players panicking. They'll be wasting boosts, they'll constantly be out of position because they're just going for every ball when they don't need to. And even when I say threatening, I don't necessarily mean a shot on your net. Not every shot is threatening, believe it or not. Some shots may be super slow and you can actually take your time, and instead of panicking and hitting it away, you can hit it where you want to hit it. You can hit it softly, whatever you need to do, and you'll understand if a shot's going to be weak just by looking at the opponent's cars. I mentioned earlier, if they're they're moving slowly, if the ball is already moving slowly, maybe they're shooting it from far away, you know it's not going to be a great shot. You're going to have time to get a save. But if someone's about to make a really good pass or go for a double tap, or you know that if this player makes a touch, it's going to put your team in a bad spot, then you should probably go for it. But otherwise, you don't really have to go for the ball. Now, obviously, if you can beat someone to the ball and you know it's going to benefit your team, then you should go for it. But if you're trying to beat someone to the ball in a non-threatening position, you got to make sure you're not just giving away possession fully if you don't need to. And if you see that nobody is around you, that means you have time to stay grounded and use open space. Speaking of which, tip number 7, use open space. Once again, this is going back to our first tip of looking where all the other players are at. If you see that you have a ton of open space around you that opponents are not covering, feel free to utilize that space. So with that space, you can use any type of dribble, like a normal dribble, air dribble, or a bounce dribble to control it. In my opinion, the bounce dribble is really good because you can go from a bounce dribble to a normal dribble, and then you can flick it, or if you drop it off your car, do a low 50. You could go to an air dribble, or you could even get a direct pass or shot. So it's super versatile. But when you control the ball, you want to make sure you have vision of the nearest opponent. So this goes back to tip number 1, because if you notice they're challenging you, you can hit it around them in a way where you or your teammate can still keep possession. And a lot of times it's just easier to hit it around your opponents rather than trying to just shoot the ball all the time, because then there might be one less defender in position to save a future shot. And sometimes you can even hit the ball back towards your half of the field, maybe for a back pass, or if you're low on boost, you can hit it towards your corner and grab the corner boost, because as we said, your corner is the safest spot. On the other hand, make sure you're not giving your opponents too much space. Don't crowd around your teammate or get right behind him all the time. And also, don't go for your back corner boost in situations where you can just grab a couple pads and stay closer to the play, because otherwise it can get really dangerous. Tip number 8, be able to adapt. Playing 1v1s can really help with this because players are going to mix up their playstyles a ton in 1v1, and if you just stick to doing the same thing over and over again, eventually someone smarter is going to figure you out and what you're doing isn't going to work as well. So you want to be able to understand how an opponent's playing and be able to change how you play if needed to counter that. A lot of times if you can't adapt to how your teammate's playing or your opponent's playing, you're just going to be super inconsistent. You got to be able to mix up how you play. If you play a lot of 2s, you might need to play first man more than usual or second man more than usual. Key is just being able to play your role the best that you can. And my next video is going to be about how to play first and second man, just how to rotate, the perfect guide you need to play 2v2 in Rocket League. So be sure to subscribe if you want to see that as soon as it comes out. Tip number 9. Now, most Rocket League players are going to say you need good mechs and you need good game sense to be a really good player. But what most people don't mention is that you really need a good mentality. And I don't just mean not tilting, but can we please stop forfeiting when the game gets tied up with over 3 minutes left? It's just cringe, dude. Anyways, I actually mean like stop blaming your teammates, stop coping, and take some accountability. You want to play with what I call the accountability mindset, where every time you get scored on, find a mistake that you made. Maybe you weren't the reason the goal happened directly, but maybe there was something you did like 10 seconds earlier that led to you getting scored on. Maybe you had a shot opportunity that you just didn't go for, or you missed, or maybe you overcommitted and you were out of position for like a second or two longer. So you want to really think about that stuff. And once again, ones will help you out with that because you have nobody else to blame but your mistake. I still see people blaming their ones losses on luck, which is ridiculous. I mean, most of the time it's on you, man. So if you struggle with blaming your teammates all the time, I would strongly suggest trying to just focus on yourself, because I used to blame my teammates all the time. Once I used that same energy on tip number 10 instead, that's what allowed me to go from hard stuck GC1 to near GC3 in just a couple months. Finally, tip number 10, watch your own replays. With replays, you can actually look at mechs and game sense, but you can't look at mentality, so that's why I made that previous tip. But if you really want to understand where you're going wrong with your mechs and game sense, watching your replays is probably the best way to do it, because when you're in game, everything is moving so fast, you might just be blaming your teammates the whole time, but you're not actually processing what mistakes you're making. Now, when you're watching your replays, you can keep a lot of the other tips that I mentioned in mind and see if you're actually using those tips or not. And if not, when you go into your next game, keep what you're doing wrong at the top of your mind and don't just autopilot. Try to actively incorporate whatever fix into your game right away. Now, if you don't know where to start or you're lost, I also analyze replays on this channel as well. So check the pinned comment for more information on that. While you're down there, let me know which tip was the most useful for you. But if you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate if you could leave a like. Maybe share this video with any friends that might need it. And consider subscribing as well, as I'll be making more informative Rocket League content. If you want to see how I analyze replays right now, or you're a hard stuck champ looking to make that push towards GC, then check out out the video on the screen right now.